For decades, they repeated that they would never back down, that no matter the weight of the sanctions, nor the constant threat of military attacks, nor the most suffocating diplomatic siege ever imposed on a modern nation, because for the Islamic Republic, enriched uranium was never just a military project but the central pillar of its existence, the basis of its regional authority, the silent trump card that made any adversary hesitate, that tilted negotiations in Tehran's favor and diminished the impact of any pressure from Washington or Tel Aviv. And yet something changed abruptly and almost unimaginably. Iran agreed not to possess nuclear weapons, agreed to discuss its enriched uranium stockpiles, and did so firmly, directly, and without the ambiguities that marked decades of negotiations. It was not a pause, not a tactical maneuver, not a temporary retreat subject to discrete reversals, but the surrender of the most strategic asset the regime had built up over generations, a line that for years had been declared insurmountable, finally crossed. And the most impressive thing was not only the result, but the way it all happened. Without American troops setting foot on Iranian soil, without military operations, spectacular underground facilities, without a campaign comparable to the greatest offensives in modern history. And that's what makes this moment so extraordinary. So difficult to fully comprehend, because even those at the center of power didn't foresee all its unfolding consequences. That's why it's essential to remain vigilant, understand every detail, and grasp the historical weight of what occurred, because we are facing one of the most decisive events in the Middle East, whose full impact is still slowly revealing itself. To understand this, it's necessary to go beyond the surface and see the true meaning of that uranium, not just as matter, but as strategy, as an instrument of power, as a symbol of regional dominance. The 2015 nuclear agreement had limited enrichment to controlled levels, establishing clear limits under constant international inspection, keeping the program distant from any direct military application, something considered essential to maintain a fragile balance in the region. But when the United States withdrew from this agreement, everything began to gradually unravel, first with discrete increases, then with bolder advances, until the levels reached extremely worrying levels. And in a short time, the accumulated stockpile represented enough material for multiple nuclear weapons. The so-called breakthrough time practically disappeared, transforming a political decision. In terms of immediate capability, and this was not a distant theory for countries like Israel, it was a direct threat, an existential scenario with a countdown. For other regional powers, it meant the beginning of a dangerous nuclear arms race that could completely redefine the global balance. Meanwhile, the material was protected in underground facilities designed to withstand the most intense attacks, built with almost impenetrable layers of defense, places where the geography itself served as a natural shield. Even when these facilities were hit, a significant part of the infrastructure was destroyed, but the central element remained because enriched uranium does not disappear, does not dissolve, does not lose its potential. It remains there silently, waiting for time and resources to be reused and rebuild everything again. It was precisely this reality that led to the elaboration of extremely complex military plans, operations involving special forces facing hostile environments, radiation, deep rubble, and constant threats, a scenario so risky that many considered it impractical outside of theory. Faced with this, a different decision was made, a decision that would completely change the course of events. Instead of directly attacking the physical heart of the program, the choice was made to target the system that sustained everything around it. A vital strategic point, a narrow geographical strait, but gigantic. In terms of importance, the country's economic flow depended almost entirely on this point, and declaring a blockade had an immediate effect, not only on the oil that stopped leaving, but on everything that stopped entering. Food, supplies, medicine, industrial parts, everything was interrupted at the same time, creating pressure that no single sanction had managed to impose. Within the country, the calculations became inevitable. Days passed, and the impacts began to manifest. Dwindling stocks, operations halting, revenues evaporating, the entire economic structure beginning to falter. Faced with this reality, the most important question arose: what is worth more, a stockpile of uranium or the immediate survival of a regime? What does one do with strategic power when the foundation that sustains that power is crumbling? And it was at this point that the logic changed. While uranium represented potential strength, the blockade represented immediate survival, and when these two forces collided, it became clear which one would determine the immediate future. Thus, Iran returned to the negotiating table, bringing with it what had for so long been considered untouchable. But this story doesn't end there, because there's a deeper, more delicate, more dangerous layer unfolding simultaneously within the country itself, where power isn't concentrated in a single authority, but fragmented among different forces with conflicting visions. On one side, a leadership that sees the economic reality as inevitable, understanding that without immediate relief, collapse is a matter of days, and willing to make concessions to keep the system alive, even if it means abandoning decades of ideological position. On the other side, a military structure that sees retreat as weakness, seeking to maintain direct control over strategic decisions, beginning to occupy spaces traditionally belonging to the civilian government, creating internal tension that goes beyond political differences and approaches a direct struggle for control of the state itself. And while these forces vie for influence, time continues to advance. External pressure doesn't diminish. The population feels the effects in the streets. The economy contracts rapidly, and the scenario becomes increasingly critical. The unstable situation creates a rare combination of factors where decisions need to be made with extreme urgency, with consequences that can define not only the immediate future, but the fate of an entire region. That's why you need to stay alert, because moments like this don't happen often. They are turning points in history where choices made in a matter of days can echo for decades. So, if you want to continue understanding every movement, every detail, every change in this scenario, leave a like and subscribe now, because it's not just a simple gesture. Every interaction helps this information reach more people who also need to be alert and aware of what is happening. And write in the comments, "I am attentive and prepared to understand the truth," because the more people awaken to these events, the greater the chance of understanding the world that is transforming before our eyes, and of not being caught off guard by what is yet to come.